is the most extreme case of an individual being sheltered that you've experienced? Serious. Story 1. I work in a hospital. 17-year-old girl is there for vomiting. Obviously, pregnancy test comes back positive, to which she says that is an impossibility. Doctor asks her if she is active, and her in the room, who I thought was a brother or something, pipes up and says they have all the time. The girl had no idea that is what LED2 pregnancy. Reddit. Allow me to introduce you to one of my roommates in college. I transferred to a college in Boston after my freshman year. My roommate was also a transfer student from a different part of the MA. Her parents told me, when she stepped out of the room, that she had never spent a night without a family member present, and that they had kept her home for a year at a local college because they just couldn't let her leave yet. Over the course of a year, mainly because she was so sheltered, she proved herself to be an ingrown hair on the genitals of life. Here are a few shining examples. I was trying to figure out if I could afford to study abroad. She told me that she didn't feel the need to travel because she had been to Epcot. I smoked at the time. She asked me not to store my lighter and my cigarettes together because it could make the dorm burn down. Decided to sleep with her boyfriend for the first time. Wanted him to wear a condom for the whole date leading up to in case he forgot to put it on later. Told the RA I had weed in the room because she had never seen loose leaf tea before. It was in the bag from the tea shop, clearly labeled green tea. Almost had burned the dorm down because no one ever told her that metal doesn't go in the microwave. Claimed that it was the dorm's cheap microwave's fault because it never does that when my mom microwaves my food. Asked me if it was hard to learn a third language since I was minoring in Spanish. I am Mexican, I speak Spanish. She honestly thought Mexicans don't speak Spanish and used the fact that she had been to both the Mexican and Spanish pavilions at Epcot to bolster her argument. Story 2. My old roommate was raised in bumblefuck nowhere, Vermont. He got accepted into a school in Baltimore for college. Goucher, I think. He had never seen a black person before. He had never had a taco before. He had never watched football before. He had never had alcohol before. He had no idea what YouTube was. This was in 2012. He still doesn't have a driver's license. Story 3. I once knew a girl in high school who came from a strict Indian family. Some of her restrictions were wasn't allowed to watch TV, listen to music, or really enjoy anything that other people did. I recall her mentioning she wasn't allowed to watch Full House, wasn't allowed to spend time with guys unless her father was present. Meeting up to work on projects outside of school wasn't an option for her, so she just teamed up with girls, wasn't allowed to participate in after-school activities, field trips, or hang out with people outside of school. Didn't get her driver's license because her father didn't want her going anywhere, wasn't allowed to get a job. Same reason as above, absolutely no social media, cell phone, or internet use. Her father eventually let her use email for school purposes and applying to college. She didn't make a FB until college. She was absolutely oblivious to any slang, trends, etc. I smoked quite a bit in high school, and I remember one day she seriously asked me, "How do you do marijuana? Do you eat it?" Haven't been in touch with her since, but from what I can tell, she's leading a pretty normal life now. Story 4. A friend of mine who is 47, never had a girlfriend, not even never been on a date, never had or kissed a girl. Pretty sure he's never masturbated. I've never asked, but he's implied it. Lived at home until he was 39, and the only reason he moved is because his mother died and he couldn't afford the mortgage. He doesn't gamble, but will ride with me to a casino occasionally. Every now and then, he will put a quarter into a slot machine and say something like, "I really figured I would win. My mother is looking down on me." And that's something she would do. Let me hit a big jackpot to take care of me. The reason his mother had a double mortgage, I'm pretty sure, is she gambled to the point of being broke and took out loans against her house. He used to say things like that she would go to the casino with one roll of quarters and play all night for 5 nights per week because she knew which machines to play, and because they knew her at the casinos, they would just give her free steak dinners and tell her which machines were ready to pay off. And the coupons for free play that she got every month in the mail were because they liked her, etc. The odd part is this was all self-inflicted. His mother was not controlling. He did it to himself. He acts like he believes nobody has until they are married. He doesn't watch R-rated movies. He also is very picky about food. Until recently, there were only literally about 4 or 5 things he would eat. He's beginning to break out of that a little, but he still has a long way to go. Story 5. The best one I knew was the girl in the early 90s. She was 16 and dressed like a particularly innocent 12-year-old. I'm talking about sweaters with teddy bears on them, keen length skirts, calf-high socks, and Mary Jane. She was super friendly, just sheltered, and when her younger brother started hanging out with us, she joined too. Nothing seemed to faze her, and nothing really interested her until one day someone put on a touch of gray. She sat enthralled, mouth slightly open. It was like watching someone hear an angel. Who was that? Oh, the Grateful Dead. They're like old people rock. Good, but real old. I think they're touring in town this year. Wow. I think I want to go to a concert. Fateful words. We lost touch over the summer. And when school started, her brother was there, but not her. No one wanted to ask. We were all really worried that something bad happened. 4-ish months later, 6 months after the concert, she was suddenly back in school. Long hair loose, wearing bell-bottoms and tie-dye, sandals, the whole works. I asked her where she had been. I want to see the dead, and it was so good, I just hopped a ride with some people when they left. Story 6, I had a friend in high school. Let's call him Bobby. Bobby's parents had fostered their 2 nephews before any of the biological kids were born, since the nephews had been in and out of care with very little parental guidance. They were stereotypically rebellious teenagers, smoking, staying out late, petty vandalism, etc. When Bobby's mom was pregnant with him, she decided she'd impose strict rules on her son and his younger siblings so they wouldn't end up as deviant as her fosters. They lived way out in the country, about 15 to 20 miles from the nearest town above 500 people. Bobby didn't have internet in the house. We graduated in 2008, and he wasn't allowed to use the phone. When we were on summer vacation, he could only communicate with me by writing letters. I ran into him in the library parking lot one summer, and his parents wouldn't let him roll down the car window to talk to me. He wasn't allowed to watch any television or listen to radio unless it was playing country or Christian music. When I asked what he did in his free time, he said as soon as school was over, he worked in his family's junkyard until he was tired enough to go to bed. We took a lot of art classes together, and he was skilled in drawing. His family's income could have gotten him enough aid to go to college. The local community college had a good design program, but they refused to allow him to go because they said he was too disabled to handle it. He had dyslexia and ADHD. Ran into him once I had finished a couple years of college. He was still living at home, working in the junkyard without pay, asking his parents' permission to leave the property at the age of 22. Funny or sad thing, since he wasn't really allowed to participate in pop culture, he didn't understand much slang. Once he got the idea that MILF was a slang word like homie or dog. He walked around the hallways saying, "What up, MILF?" to his classmates till someone corrected him. Story 7, in my first year of university, I had a classmate from a very religious family who wasn't allowed to consume secular media. In one of our French classes, we played 20 questions as a speaking exercise. This girl was worried when her turn to guess came, because she hadn't heard of any of the celebrities, fictional characters, etc., that the other students had to guess. So, to give her a fighting chance, we decided that the person we have her guess would be the Prime Minister. Turned out she didn't know who the Prime Minister was. After her first year of university, she dropped out and decided to go to Bible college instead. Story 8, my parents are fundamentalist Christians, and the majority of the kids I was allowed to hang out with came from homes with the same style of faith. There was this incredibly Flanders-esque family we grew up with. 3 sons, all of their names beginning with the same letter. They weren't allowed to watch football on TV because it was too violent. They'd never heard of The Simpsons. Were completely forbidden to play any video game that had blood in it. And Hay Race, one of the worst ones. They had a microphone on their computer that could record your voice. This was 1997, and I was like, oh, this will be funny. And I said cuff into the mic, and then played it in reverse. So it said, their son laughed along with me, and then said, what does it mean he was at least 12? Story 9, I know a guy who isn't allowed to watch R-rated movies. He's 19. He isn't allowed to visit a friend's house unless he calls first to ask if they own a gun or smoke. He isn't allowed to ride with other people his age. He isn't allowed to walk around a store by himself, even if his parents are still with him in the store. He isn't allowed to play M-rated video games and most T-rated games. He isn't allowed to watch SpongeBob. He still has enforced bedtime. In addition, he doesn't get the privileges of his parents doing his home responsibilities like a lot of other sheltering parents do. He makes most of his food and does most of his laundry. All of this has made him severely depressed, I think. Story 10, as a student in Germany, my brother went on a trip to KLN with a group of other German and international student friends. They were having a good time and started drinking that evening. One, this Chinese lass, wasn't used to alcohol whatsoever and couldn't manage a full bottle of Pilsner. After a while, a few of them had fallen asleep, including this girl. So the awake ones did the classic drunken prank of drawing all over their friends. Upon waking, she noticed the others had been doodling on each other. She looked in a mirror to see the quintessential cartoon penis scrawled on her forehead, but was pretty bemused. What is this? She asked. A penis, the others replied. Or what, they ran through all the German slang words for penis. Wong, but she wouldn't cotton on. In man's, that thing men have. What, she'd grown up, achieved good grades, and moved to the other side of the world, but had zero education. She wasn't embarrassed, annoyed, or threatened, just confused. In the end, they apologized, told her to forget it, and helped her wipe it off. Story 11, my little brother has been friends with one of our neighbors for years. He comes from an extremely Christian family with 7 kids. Poor kid has basically never had anything to himself, not allowed to watch any non-educational TV. His parents briefly allowed Nickelodeon, then banned it again when they heard someone say shut up in an episode of SpongeBob. You get the picture. He comes over our house a lot, where we expose him to all sorts of real cartoons. He loves Adventure Time video games, etc. One time when I was still living at home, he stayed the night, and I was running out to the store, so I brought them back ice cream. When I gave him his own pint of Ben, and Jerry's the damn kid didn't know what to do with himself. They are still friends, young teens now, and all in all, they've been a great influence on each other. My brother exposes him to normal kid stuff and actual social skills, and he keeps my brother from being too wild. Story 12. I had a friend who drank Seltzer water all through high school because his parents told him it was the same thing as Coca-Cola. It was tough breaking the news to him. Story 13. A coworker who was 25 realized one day during lunch that not everyone went to the beach during the summer like she did with her family. I had to be like, did you know some people don't go anywhere at all? Story 14. Aged 18. A girl from school told me that Mela in To Kill a Mockingbird couldn't have been raped because she wasn't pregnant. The same girl also told me that girls ought to carry around a condom in case they were raped upon tasting grape juice. She asked me if it was wine, and it just thought of another one. I've written about this chap before, but he hailed from a very wealthy family in China and had no idea on how to use common household appliances. The following story is vulgar, so those of you of a sensitive disposition do not read on. One day, he was complaining to me how very loud his neighbors were in the student accommodation in which we resided. This is how the conversation went in. I don't understand why the boy living next door insists on playing hide and seek at 2 in the morning, especially when there is so little space in the rooms. Me, what do you mean? Him, well, I heard a girl moaning a lot and saying, wait a moment, hold on. Then he, in the most labored of voices, croaked, I can't, before I heard a very loud noise which sounded like someone flinging themselves upon the bed. Me, okay, how very silly of them. Story 15. My roommate in college would call her mother to ask for permission to order a pizza. We lived 3 hours away from home, and she was paying with her own money. Story 16. The firstborn child of the people for whom my ex-wife used a nanny was the worst case of this I've ever seen. At the age of 15, his mother was still cutting his meat for him at every meal. He's in grad school now and still cannot tie his shoelaces. Well, technically that isn't true. He doesn't own any shoes with laces because he cannot tie them. He owns nothing but slip-ons and shoes with Velcro straps. He cannot prepare a meal. He buys all his food prepared, dines out, gets it delivered, etc. He can't change a flat tire, can't hammer a nail, operate a screwdriver, can't check the oil on his car, can barely pump his own gas. His parents did everything for him and consistently overrode the nanny when she tried to teach him to do things on his own. Story 17. In my sophomore year of high, I convinced this Indian kid that was a vegetable. A few days later, he asked his mom for some to see what it tastes like. Story 18. While discussing teenager development in my nursing class, the instructor talked about monitoring her teen's texts and told a story about how she saw texts mentioning doing 69, doggy, and cowgirl on her daughter's phone, and that she then had to have a talk with her. 40-year-old woman with 4 kids leaned over and asked what that meant. Another girl in the same class was bragging that she got pregnant so quickly after getting married because her husband's was so big that it went all the way up through her uterus and right to the ovary. She didn't know basic female anatomy. Scary thing for a nurse. Story 19. Friend's 20-year-old sister had her mom make her a French bread pizza in the toaster oven. Mom went next door for 2 minutes, got a phone call from the girl crying cause she was watching the pizza burn, had no idea how to get it out or turn off the oven. Story 20. The saddest one I can think of is a girl in college who was homeschooled and very conservative. She had huge and was basically always terrified by them because of modesty. She had no knowledge of bras and only had a couple of very poorly fitting sports bras that gave her sores on her shoulders and torso. It took a lot of convincing from our friend group to get her to finally go buy her own bra and gasp, let someone fit her. She had no idea there were different kinds of bra fits and styles, and it really improved her quality of life. Story 21. In 8th grade, our science teacher was a total jokester like all good science teachers. One day, he showed up to class pissed off something fierce. He looked like he was about to have a conniption. He started the class off by saying we will no longer be having fun because someone in the class filed a complaint that the teacher joked too much. The girls, we all knew who she was. She was basically special ed from how sheltered she was. Parents got involved, and they all had a meeting with the principal. It was seriously ridiculous. The same girl was also the reason the Halloween haunted house party got canceled. She just couldn't handle it. Some mother should have swallowed. Story 22. Not sure if it was sheltered, but she had some crazy arsed family dynamic going on. The scene? A fairly notorious, huge, old 15-bedroom student house right across the road from the most popular student bar in University City. One landline phone is the days before cell phones were even a thing. 5 times a night, without fail, the operator would interrupt someone else's phone call, so her batshit crazy mother could scream down the phone about some emergency. In the end, we told her to off. Her parents and 6 much younger siblings lived about 45 minutes away and would regularly swarm through the house demanding to know where she was and what she was doing, sitting in her room studying like she always does. One time they picked her up, took her God knows where for the weekend. She had parked her car behind mine, and apparently her dad had not allowed her to take 15 seconds to move it. Luckily, the lads got together and picked it up and wedged it between the building next door and the fence where it couldn't be moved unless you also found 8 big, strong boys who can lift a car if they were so inclined. She wasn't allowed to watch TV or listen to the radio. Had to call her parents when she was leaving for classes and when she got home. Story 23, Gloria Tesh. She claims to be youngest published novelist in the world while her parents used their own wealth to publish the books. Hey, race an article about it. They even hired some actors to make her seem legit. She then became a rapper, and now she models. I can't even begin to imagine a life in which your parents make you so delusional. Story 24, in late high school. I was friend with a girl that was so sheltered she needed to have explained to her the difference between marijuana and cocaine. I have no idea if she just missed several years of dare or she was just ignorant to the world. Story 25, this girl I was seeing and I were about to watch Elf, and right before she popped the DVD, and she turns to me and says, "Wait, can you watch this since you're Jewish?" And this same girl thought that since I had never had before that I had never had we were 19. She's lucky she was hot-headed, however. What she lacks in street smarts, she makes up for in book smarts. She graduated college in 3 years. She has an internship with some big law firm. She's getting her master's in poli-sci, and she'll be going to Cornell Law School next year. Story 26, a girl I knew in high school wasn't allowed to read any of the Harry Potter books or even watch the movies because her parents were super against the idea of witchcraft. Story 27, I went to Catholic school, and one of the girls who sat next to me was probably the worst I've experienced. She did not watch TV, listen to music, hang out with friends, etc. She was a really devout Catholic, so she thought everything was evil and threw judgment at everyone all the time. Some examples: 1, I slept during religion class frequently. I am not religious. And she told me she was concerned about my safe passage to heaven. 2, I said damn it one time. She freaked out and screamed IS it so hard to say darn it. 3, got really upset at me because I was listening to rap music for thought video games were the cause of my lack of faith. I think she thought she needed to save me. She ended up becoming a nun after we graduated. It was really weird because I went to her wedding to Jesus. The convent put her into seclusion, and she wasn't allowed to speak to anyone in the outside world face to face. She was only allowed to pray, eat, and I got a letter from her 3 years later saying that she was allowed one day to see friends and family behind screen, didn't visit her. Story 28, I was invited to a block party barbecue to meet the neighbors in the area. I had just moved to. A couple who were acquaintances of the host had a baby on the strictest schedule I've ever heard of. In talking, she only has 6 minutes to drink her bottle. Strict at exactly the 6-minute mark, they took the bottle away. Burped her for exactly 3 minutes, followed by a 1 hour 15-minute nap. Woke her up exactly 1 hour and 15 minutes later, and then we were only allowed to socialize with the baby for a very specific amount of time before she was to be let down in an enclosure for time to alone playtime. Both parents had a smartwatch that kept displaying countdowns to the next event the baby was to experience. The entire time they were going of about how she is the smartest baby ever. No matter how we try to change the convo, some random alarm would go of, and then they will bring up the baby genius. I felt terrible for that baby's life. Story 29, a girl in my high school had to step out of class once because her parents didn't allow her to use YouTube, and even went as far to tell the teacher she couldn't, even though this was some educational science video. Story 30, she didn't know that chickens were animals and that they had bones. She was 11. She thought they were just automatically in nuggets or something. I know another girl who eats the same dinner every day and has never tried blueberries before. I also recall her saying that she had never eaten any meat but in chicken, but I'm probably wrong. A 14-year-old who cried when someone sat on his bed and made his mom wash it. The worst is a girl in my grade who's much younger than everyone else and calls her mother mommy. She's obsessed with food, didn't know that high schoolers had lockers, and had never used hand sanitizer before. She also thought it was an event when I walked with her to the shop to get lunch, which she paid for in pennies. Story 31, my best friend bought a house and has shared it with 2 of his friends from college for almost 5 years now. After previously living with him in dorms and then a rental, one of his roommates never learned how to use a kitchen. Sometimes funny stories come out of this, and sometimes she breaks things that aren't cheap to fix. She makes scrambled eggs by filling a medium saucepan about 2/3 with milk, dumping in a couple of eggs, and stirring over high heat until the milk is simmering and the eggs are cooked. She does this because she heard a long time ago that you're supposed to add milk to your scrambled eggs, but she remembers it backwards: add eggs to milk instead of milk to eggs. The other day, she made soup from scratch with just water, onions, and sausage. After letting it boil for 20 minutes, she decided it was done, but complained about how thin it was. My friend suggested that she should let it simmer for hours to reduce and develop flavor. And she said, nah, I'm trying to be healthy. A few weeks ago, she was cleaning out her dedicated cabinet and found a box of pasta she didn't want. Instead of putting it in the trash, she poured the uncooked pasta into the garbage disposal and turned it on. I forget how my friend ended up fixing it, but it was a major source of stress for him all day since she did it fairly early in the morning and texted him about it while he was at work. Edit remembered another. Again, while he was at work, my friend got a text from his roommate, this time asking about their oven self-cleaning function. He asked her why she wanted to know, and she said she had just happened to notice that it was filthy. My friend had used it the previous night to make his own dinner and had noticed nothing of the kind, so he told her to wait. When he got home that night and saw how gross the inside of the oven was, he asked her about it some more, and it came out that she had filled a rimmed baking sheet almost to the brim with oil to cook herself some frozen chicken fingers, and when it heated up, the oil got all over the inside of the oven. Since it was July and they live in a row home in a city with no central air and wimpy window units, and the self-cleaning gets really hot and can last for hours, my friend taught his roommate how to clean the oven manually. Story 32. I met this girl who was in her early 20s and had been raised in a religious homeschool setting until she turned 18. We were hanging out in a group after helping her, and a friend of mine moved to their new loft. Somehow, it slipped out that she genuinely believes in mermaids, like a fact of life endangered species that really exists. We were all speechless for a few minutes before the mocking ensued. Poor thing. Story 33. I grew up as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I've never been to a birthday party, celebrated Christmas or Halloween, etc. I still live with my parents, so I've never dated anyone, kissed, etc. But thank God I'm not as sheltered as some of the kids I've grown up with. In high school, a girl from my crutch was talking to me and another friend and mentioned that the first time she had with her husband, she was going to keep her underwear on. And we had to break it to her that that's not how that works. Story 34. My cousin was homeschooled and sheltered from non-religious people. She didn't know anything about STDs, men, anything really. She also never took conventional medicine. She had with a random guy in her massage therapy school, got genital herpes, pregnant, and refused to take thyroid medication. Her baby was born severely deformed from her thyroid being out of. She now takes conventional medicine. Story 35. Not nearly as extreme as the other ones on here, but a friend not anymore didn't know about any of the school shootings, movie theater shooting Colorado, the Boston bombing, or any other notable acts of violence because his parents were scared it would scare him. Keep in mind he was in high school. It's important to know what's happening, especially at that age. Story 36. I dated a boy. Looking back, I'm not sure why, who at 18 years old. Had to ask his parents how old the earth was. They said the Bible timeline says the earth is 6,000 years old. He believed his parents. He also cried one time after we had, because he said Jesus wouldn't forgive him, but he still asked to have with me again after that. He went to a Bible school and got a Bible degree. Biggest mistake of my life, to be honest. Story 37. South Asian Americans tend to be a pretty sheltered bunch, at least when growing up. Many of us come from conservative backgrounds where our parents tell us nothing about alcohol or drugs except to not do them. Few of my friends in high school didn't know what condoms were or if their parents actually had. Then in college, we either stay shocked and horrified at what everyone else is doing, get used to it and not care, or just rebel and do everything our parents told us not to do. Story 38. Knew someone who at 18 years old had never made her own sandwich, didn't know what a slinky was, and thought chalk was only for schoolwork on the blackboard instead of also something you could play with. Story 39. In high school, my friend and I were discussing circumcision. He stated that he couldn't believe people would become circumcised, and he had a very pained expression on his face. I replied, it's not that bad. Him, are you kidding me? That would hurt so bad. Me, like when they cut it off? Him, no, forever. Me, it doesn't hurt. Him, circumcised. And what, you mean like he makes a karate chop motion with his hand? Me, yes, you aren't. Him, no. You mean they cut off your head? Me, what, no, man, they just cut off the foreskin. It kind of looks like Darth Vader's helmet. He then looks at me with an uncertain look and then runs out of the room. Several minutes later, he comes back completely astonished. Him circumcised. Story 40. I went to high school with a guy whose parents wouldn't let them watch any movie that was rated higher than PG. We were at a friend's house watching Ice Age, and he thought it was the greatest thing ever made. We were 18, Same guy also commented on how happy and fun Third Eye Blind Semi-Charmed Life was. Once we got over laughing at him and explained what the song was really about, he didn't like it anymore and refused to keep listening to the rest of the CD. Story 41, I went to a military boarding school. We had a kid transfer in from a strict homeschooled his whole life situation. When he was in 11th grade, for whatever reason his parents decided it was time for him to leave. To sum it up, the use of swear words made him cry. Not even directed at him. If he even overheard them in a conversation that had nothing to do with him. Story 42, girl I'm dating had never had toast. Toast? I was like, want some toast? She said, I don't know. I was like, okay, why? I've never had it before. What? So hard not to end it. So many other small things too. Sauce like nothing she ever ate had anything on it. It would be like dry pasta with some carrots. WTF. Story 43 had a roommate who was homeschooled all her life. She decided to move in with my boyfriend and I because she wanted to be independent. She had a lot of trouble with managing her money. So we helped her make a budget, which was interesting because she insisted she couldn't pay more than $200 month rent, all utilities, internet, and food included, because she needed $500 month for fun money. Eventually, she got really mad in December. When we asked for rent, she had thought it would be free for Christmas and had planned on using her rent money for presents. We explained that's not how it works. We still needed to pay rent. If she didn't, we would have to pay her share, which isn't cool. She got upset, went, and locked herself in her room for the night. I didn't think anything of it since she was prone to these tantrums until I went to go to bed and my dog went to her door and started whining. I knocked and called for her. Nothing. Finally, I used the emergency key shed given me after 5 minutes. She was on the floor, naked, in a pool of puke, empty large bottle of vodka beside her. I call 911, get her an ambulance, and sit with her, make sure she's okay. Call her parents, etc. At the hospital, the doc said she had serious alcohol poisoning and would have died. Her mom and dad are screaming at Maya and I for causing her to do this by not giving her free rent for Christmas since they always had. When she sobers up, we found out that she didn't know about alcohol poisoning. Her parents had never explained or taught her. She goes home with them and decided to move back home, which was okay. Except she left her stuff at our place for 2 months with no rent, and then got harassed by her and her parents for not paying her ambulance bill since we called it. There were so many things she was completely clueless on: technology, life and responsibilities, finances. Even Ed, she had a boyfriend and they were active, but she didn't know about STIs or STDs. I get that she was homeschooled, but I feel like there still needs to be a mandatory curriculum and testing. Story 44, knew a girl. She had been homeschooled, then joined us in grade school. She and her family were surprisingly normal. Her parents hadn't been religious fanatics or cultists or whatever, and had obviously done a good job of teaching because she was caught up and her grades were good. We didn't even know what the deal was or why they had chosen to homeschool her so long. Then we realized that she didn't know how to fall. One day at lunch, she tripped and fell, but instead of doing anything to arrest her fall, she just keeled over on her face like a fainting goat. 1 minute vertical, the next, boom, horizontal, bleeding with a broken tooth. We thought it was weird, but then it happened multiple times, with every fall, no matter how minor or preventable, being a really bad one, and almost immediately her parents went back to homeschooling her since she kept getting hurt. There was nothing wrong with this girl. She had no coordination problems or other physical or mental issues. She just sucked at falling down. We eventually found out after going over her house that everything was padded and child safe. No sharp edges or corners anywhere. There were foam mats on the floor in the kitchen, super padded carpet elsewhere, gym mats halfway up the walls. Almost nothing in the house was actually hard. Her parents were staggeringly physically overprotective to the point that her house was basically a slightly less plush, bouncy castle. She had been so insulated for so long from any kind of repercussions of falling and hurting herself that she either never fully developed or had unlearned the reflex to put her arms out and stop herself. She came back in HS as a totally normal person and played softball. I don't know when her parents decided they were insane and needed to fix this weird, instinctless child they had created, but they had apparently let her develop normal human reflexes at some point. Story 45, I grew up in a homeschool community. I was homeschooled, but not for religious reasons, and there weren't many options for socializing. A lot of the kids in the group were very sheltered. One of my friend's mom wouldn't even let us leave the Barbie dolls naked. She thought it would give us bad thoughts. Another time I witnessed a girl getting in trouble because her mother thought she was watching a dog go to the bathroom. Fun fact, the girl for the first story grew up to be the town bicycle. Everyone's got a ride. Story 46, my brother's friend wasn't allowed to do anything independently until he was at college. By that time, he had lost several friends. Only recently he's reached the same level of socialization that is expected of a 23-year-old.